I noticed my older daughter, the kid in the middle, she's the one who's taking almost like the leadership role out of the three kids because she's the most mature compared to my son, even though she's younger. So sometimes she'll be telling him what to do. So it's kind of interesting dynamic to seeing a younger sister telling her older brother what to do and what not to do and what to say and what not to say.
That's our guest this week, Jason Hsieh. Jason and his wife Miho have 3 children, including Keanu, who has autism and ADHD. Jason and Keanu formed LakiKid, a website that sells sensory tools and toys that help kids with autism and other special needs at school and at home. It's a fascinating story, and we'll hear it on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello to David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
And now let's hear this intriguing conversation between Jason Hsieh and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Jason Hsieh of University Place, Washington, who's the father of 3 and founder of LakiKid.com, a startup dedicated to empowering kids to have a full life of possibilities. Jason, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's my honor.
You and your wife, Miho, have been married for 11 years and are proud parents of 3 children, Moani, 3, who has speech delays, Luana, 7, who was diagnosed with leukemia, and Keanu, 10, who has autism and ADHD. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Yeah, so I was grew up in Taiwan, and I moved to the state when I was 15. I actually went to a boarding school in Canada for 1 year, then went to US. So my background is pretty traditional Asian. Since then, we have I met my wife after I graduated, and we were able to have 3 wonderful children together.
Okay, well, thanks for the quick flyby. I want to go back a little bit. When you were growing up in Taiwan, my recollection was you were the oldest of 2.
That's correct, yeah.
And do you have a younger brother or sister?
I have a younger sister. Her name is Annie.
Okay. And is Annie in the States or is Annie back in Taiwan?
She also lives in Washington State, about an hour from my house.
Okay. Do your parents still live in Taiwan, or where do they live?
They kind of fly back and forth. They have a house in the state, but they have a house in Taiwan. But they have been living in Taiwan since the COVID because it's just safer in Taiwan with COVID.
Okay. Out of curiosity, what does your dad do for a living?
He's also an entrepreneur like myself. He run and operate his own business since I was born, and he owned a telecommunication business. His company create and design and make is called phone system for like companies, for hotels. His company also designed the software for the phone system, and they also manufacturing their own phone system, like the actual product too. So.
Okay. I'm sort of curious to know, how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
This is, I would say, in the way I really respect him, but also there's a distance between me and him. I guess that's kind of common in, especially the Asian culture. Like father is always like the kind of the most respect figure in the families. And I think one of the things that made me want to be an entrepreneur myself is really coming from my dad, because growing up, I just seeing him running the business for all his life and the struggle, the things that he have went through. But there's also some distance between me and him. Like sometimes we didn't really open up, I guess, to really talk about our true feelings. And it's also, I was away from my family since I was 15. Since I mentioned I was sent to a boarding school in Canada. Then my parents decided to send me to live with one of their friends in California for a couple of years. So I haven't been really close to my dad, unfortunately. But since I have my own kids now, I feel like there's a couple other things I can share with him a little bit more. But one thing I always regret is I feel like my dad spends so much his time and energy into his business that we don't have a lot of time, like quality time spending together as like as a family as much as I would really like. So.
Well, thank you for your authenticity and being so open and honest about that. Maybe there's a lesson learned there about your relationship with your kids. Even though you're an entrepreneur, maybe you'll make a bigger effort to spend more time with your kids. In addition to that, are there any other important takeaways, something your dad always said or did, or something that you've tried to incorporate into your own parenting that you learned from your dad?
My dad is highly logical. Every time he wants to say something, he will always come up with like a story, then he'll go into a series behind it, and he will talk about like why you should do it a certain way. So it's just like the way his parenting is kind of interesting, and that's I guess I also try to learn a little bit from him, but I tend to be a little bit more emotional sometimes than my dad.
Okay.
So I think that's a major difference between just different style parenting, I guess.
Okay. So I'm sort of curious to know what, if any, relationship you had with your grandfathers, first on your dad's side and then on your mom's side.
On my dad's side, I was pretty close to my grandfather before he passed away. I think he passed away when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. So he passed away pretty young. But my grandfather was, he would take me around to different places when I was a kid. I remember one of the things I really liked when I was a kid is the excavator. I like to see construction site and see the machine moving around. So he always like take me on his motorcycle and take me to different construction site and just show me those construction machine. It's kind of interesting. So I remember that pretty clearly. On my mom's side, unfortunately, both of my grandparents passed away before I was born on my mom's side.
Okay. Well, it's nice that you got to meet at least one of your grandfathers. I think that there's a legacy there. It's not just pictures and stories, but maybe a firsthand understanding, even if he did pass away at a relatively early age. So like you mentioned, you went to school here in the States, University of California at Santa Barbara. And my recollection was you took a degree in economics and accounting. And I'm wondering, where did your career take you?
So I graduated. I started my first startup right after graduation. Fortunately, it was a flop. It was a website design company I started with my friend. But after a year, we have to close the business due to some issue with my partners. That's kind of my first ever business lesson learned. And I kind of got into this kind of a state of depression after that first, the first business failure. And I decided to move back to Taiwan after that. And I was working in Taiwan. And then, during that time before I even started my business, I met my wife when I was in college. I lived in Taiwan for a few years. So I got married after that too. So my wife and I decided to move to Japan, working for different companies. So since graduation, besides running my own, starting my first own business, then I go back to the corporate world again. And I actually worked in my dad's company for a few years in Taiwan. Then before I moved to Japan with my wife. So.
Okay. Well, speaking of your wife, I'm sort of curious to know, how did you and Miho meet?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. So we met in the bus stop in Hawaii. So I was just vacationing and with my families, and she was visiting one of her friends that lived in Hawaii back then. And I think I I got lost, and I just asked her for direction at the bus stop, and also got her phone number, and that's kind of how we met. So, yeah.
And the rest is history. Okay. Let's switch gears and talk about special needs. And I'm sort of curious to know, before Keanu's diagnosis, if you and Miho had any experience with special needs.
No, actually, this before that, this is really a very new, I guess, idea or concept, and a whole different world to us before we learn about our son's diagnosis with autism and ADHD. I think that's also part of the culture in Asia. It's such a taboo topic. The mental disabilities and mental issues is people really don't talk about, even if they might have it. So we are not really well prepared, so to speak, when we first learn about the diagnosis. And I was actually in the phase of denial myself for the first couple of months, even refusing to believe that there's something wrong with our son initially.
So how old was Keanu when he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD?
He was 3.
Okay. And you were in Japan at the time?
Yes, yeah, that's when we learned it. But unfortunately, we couldn't find the resources and the therapy opportunity in Japan at the time. And just to give you a number, Tokyo metropolitan area have larger populations than city of New York. So that's like 10, I think there's a little bit more than 10 million people living in that city area around Tokyo. However, we can only find 2 therapy centers to take our son to back then. So that is not a very good situation to be in, to live in such a big city, but you can only go to 2 places. There's only 2 therapy centers we can find. So that kind of give you the severity of the situations when you can imagine that many people living in that city. I'm pretty sure that a lot of other kids also have similar issue like our son, but having only 2 places to go, that's not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, well, that's the sad reality. I don't know that much about what's going on in Tokyo or Japan, but I know that in the U.S., with all the challenges and problems that we have, we do have a very robust community for people with special needs and all different types of special needs. Lots of resources, lots of therapies, community by community. More concentrated in urban and suburban areas, less so in rural areas. But I'm sort of curious to know, early on, after you got past your own denial, what were some of the concerns or fears that you and Miho had as it relates to the diagnosis and moving forward?
One of the big concerns is really his ability to live by himself eventually, and also like careers, opportunities, and all that. That's kind of the major, I guess, concern. And also educationally, was he able to kind of keep up with his peer? And that's actually one of our focus for this year. We got him like an English tutors, and he was also doing some additional sessions with one of the local institutions here in Washington that focusing on learning disabilities. It's not really a therapy. It's called ARC therapeutic. But in their session, they focusing on, they have an interesting tool called, they try to teach kids concept of linking different component of a sentence into different shape. So it helps kids that is kind of struggling with languages to able to write and read better by using a concept of connecting a different shape to different, for example, noun is a certain shape, verb is a certain shape, conjunction is a certain shape. So that's something we are also kind of working with him to help him with his reading and writing skill. That's something that he's a little bit behind compared to his same age peer. And one thing we're having also trying is to giving different opportunity of trying different potential career options. So one thing we have been working with him is like having him to take different coding lessons online to see whether or not he will have any interest. And recently he's into stop motion animation. So we also try to give him different opportunities so he can use different tool and make his own stop motion animation. And he actually did a pretty good job. He was able to make like a 30-second animation a couple weeks ago just with his toys and stuff. So that's just kind of potential different career opportunity that might be of interest of him, because something I noticed, not just with my son, but because my startup, we also interact with a lot of other family that have kids with special needs, is those kids tend to, once they find one thing they are interested in, they tend to hyper focus. So they will be focusing in only the thing they're interested in, and they can be really great at it. So what we are really trying to do is, what is one thing that my son really interested in that can lead to a future career? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting to plant those seeds at such an early age. Remember, he's only 10 years old, right? So he would potentially, be in the workaday world 8 to 10 years down the road. So I'm sort of curious, just to go back a little bit, how many years did you stay in Japan before you realized that, this isn't what we want to do, right? Because that was a big decision for you and Miho to make, to move from Japan to the U.S. So I'm sort of curious to know, how did that decision transpire?
We learned about the diagnosis in 2013, and we decided and moved in 2015. So about 2 years. And the one major factor is we understand the importance of, I guess, early child development. So the earlier we can make the move, the more impact we can potentially have on our son. So that's why we were able to make that decision and do the move. Or I guess fortunately enough, we have the resources to do that move across the Pacific Ocean, pretty much from Japan to the US. I think that was the right decision for the family and for our son. One more thing I want to share is when he got his diagnosis, he was nonverbal from age 3 to 5. For the first 2 or 3 years, he was nonverbal. But now he is on the other side of the spectrum. He's hyper talkative and he just talks too much. He won't stop asking people questions. So he go from nonverbal to hyper talkative and he won't stop talking. So it's a very interesting journey to see as a parent, to see how much he grow and go through that. So.
Yeah, well, he might be making up for some lost ground for not talking for a couple of years.
Yeah, maybe.
But it is fascinating. So I'm sort of curious to know a little bit more about the decision to move to the U.S., because my recollection was you speak pretty good English, but Miho doesn't.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how has that challenge worked out? And are there any other challenges that you've experienced as a family as well?
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest struggles, especially for my wife. We have been living, like I mentioned, in 3 different countries so far. So that was Taiwan, it's Japan, and then now it's US. She have a similar issue while we were living in Taiwan together as well. Because of the language barrier, she doesn't speak Chinese neither. But going back to the state is also a language barrier for her. And she's still taking ongoing like ESL, English as a second language classes, even right now as well in community college. But that's definitely one of the things that I'm trying to help her with. And it's difficult, especially when you have kids with special needs. You need to take the kids to so many different therapy sessions. And when there's a language barrier, it's kind of hard to understand what exactly the therapist is working with the kid. That sometimes I really need to be the interpreter and try to kind of relate all that information, and even sometimes help coordinate all the medical appointment because of the language barrier. So that I think that's one of the most challenging things. And like you mentioned, our older daughter also was diagnosed with leukemia a couple of years ago. So having the leukemia diagnosis and the whole cancer treatment appointment on top of all the medical appointment for our son, doing, unfortunately, she already finished all the chemotherapy and she's in remission right now. So, but doing that I think the chemotherapy is about 2.5 years. During that 2.5 years, that was like the toughest time we have ever faced together as a family. And I was also trying to get my startup off the ground because it's shortly after I started the startup. That's like, I think 6 months after I started the company. That's where we learned about our daughter's diagnosis. So everything kind of happened like very in the sequence, and everything happening at the same time. That's like one of the darkest and the most stressful period that we have faced.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I'm relieved to hear that her cancer, her leukemia, is in remission. And I'm hoping it's just one of those things where, it is what it is, right? You can't change the diagnosis. You just have to go through the treatment and hope for the best. And I'm hoping that it's just a blip on the radar screen when you look back on it, years and years down the road, and that, it won't impact her development, either physical or intellectual development, going forward. So I'm sort of curious to know what impact Keanu's situation has had on his siblings, his 2 younger sisters.
Oh, that's a very interesting dynamic. To be honest, I haven't been very closely observing their dynamic as much, but I noticed my older daughter, the kid in the middle, she's the one who's taking almost like the leadership role out of the 3 kids, because she's the most mature compared to my son, even though she's younger. So sometimes she'll be telling him what to do. So it's kind of interesting dynamic to seeing a younger sister telling her older brother what to do and what not to do, and what to say and what not to say. So that's a very interesting dynamic that we have noticed. And my daughter Luana, the kid in the middle, she's also really good at taking care of her younger sister. So she really stepped up, especially after she was finished her chemotherapy and finished her cancer treatment. I feel like I do believe everything happened to us for a reason. I mean, things don't happen to us; it's happening for us. So with our son's diagnosis, with our situation with our daughter, it make our family stronger at the end, and I think it's also make her stronger. I think she can go look back to that experience in her life, and she knows she went through that experience that no one else went through. That just kind of proves like how much stronger she is. I think it is help her to build even a better character as a human being.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Your kids are relatively young, so it's probably hard to know what the real impact will be until years down the road.
Yeah.
But it's something that, it sounds like you're cognizant of, and obviously you need to sort of do a balancing act, right? You don't want all the attention, all the resources to go to your son at the disadvantage of your daughters. So time will tell.
Yeah.
I'm sort of curious to know what supporting organizations you and your family have relied on for Keanu.
Besides all the therapy we went to, of course, we take him to all kinds of different therapy, including ABA therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapies, and few other. But I guess the organization that have the biggest impact is a local organization called Open Door. They are a non-profit organization here locally, and they provide, I guess, information and education for multicultural families. So when we first moved to Washington, we'll be attending their like training session once a week, where they actually arrange interpreter for my wife, and they also arrange childcare on site, so we can bring the kids and they have people looking after the kid while me and my wife is attending their like training webinar or seminar completely free of charge. So I think that nonprofit has really helped our family to get kind of understanding, because we'll have training about like what is an IEP, because we don't have IEP in Asia. None of the country have like those individualized education plan that where we have here in US. So just navigating that special education system and understanding what is the thing we can get and what is our rights and what are some of the thing we can try to fight for and try to get from or negotiate with the school system. And also the medical system has been a huge help for both me and my wife. So that's one of the organization. And the second organizations that has been really helpful is a nonprofit called Culture-city. This is an organization I really truly believe in their missions. They are trying to help the world to become more sensory inclusive. So they have a huge program called Sensory Inclusive Initiative, where they have program around the world. They have a program in US, Canada, UK, and Australia, and the location include NBA stadiums, football and baseball arenas, zoos, aquariums, and they'll go into those locations and provide training to the staff. So the staff is aware of the sensory issues kids like my son face. They also provide physical tool called sensory bags. Inside the sensory bags, we'll have different fidget toys, noise canceling headphones, and one of the weighted blankets, which my startup company actually designed for Culture-city. So we have been partnering with Culture-city since my company started a couple of years ago. And last but not least, as part of the program, they also build sensory room, which is like a quiet place that the family can go to.
And that's Culture-city with a K. Culture with a K.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
We'll be sure to include that in the show notes as well. I'm wondering if there's any other organizations that your family has relied on, either for Keanu's benefit or just for your own benefit.
I would say there was also the Father Network in Washington. I did attend a few of their meetings in the past to just get to know other fathers that's facing the similar challenges.
Yeah, well, the Washington State Fathers Network, run by Luis Mendoza, is really a very influential group there in the Northwest, and they do some amazing work.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears and talk about LakiKid. And I'm wondering, how long has that organization been around? What's the mission, and what's your vision for that organization?
Yeah, so this is a startup company. We started back in 2017. Our main mission is to empower, support, and educate kids with learning differences, and really help to create an environment where everyone could really live a life full of possibility. And we do that by creating different physical products like sensory tools or sensory toys to help kids, and also help some of our products designed to help the classroom environment to make it more sensory inclusive by introducing different flexible seatings options for the classroom. So instead of sitting on the chair, the student could be sitting on one of the yoga ball that we designed it, or one of the wiggle seat that we have, or they can use one of our fidget tool. In the classroom, a lot of classroom will have like countdown corner. So we also provide tools and different product for it. And on top of that, we also provide a lot of education through our video blog and through our podcast, trying to educate the family that's going through the similar journey that my own family was or is going through. And we partner with different organizations as well. Like I mentioned, we partner with Culture-city for many years to really support their cause. And my long-term vision for the company is I want to grow the company big enough so I can really go back to the country in Asia and help the family there, because there's no company like mine even existed in Asia that is doing this kind of that is providing product and education to the families in Asia, in Japan and Taiwan included. So that's my long-term vision.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. And I think that it's an admirable goal, not just to grow the business and make it successful here in the States, but to the extent that you can scale it, to be able to take it to Asian countries like you were suggesting. I'm sort of curious now, where did the name LakiKid come from? What does Laki mean?
Oh, lucky is just a Hawaiian spelling of the word lucky, Lucky, just a
Oh,
different, just a play on words.
got it.
So,
So it would
yeah,
be, if it was
yeah,
in English, it would be LakiKid as opposed to LakiKid. Okay.
yeah,
Well, thanks for the
yeah,
explanation.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
crystal clear to me now. So I'm sort of thinking about advice now, and I'm wondering what advice that you would suggest to fathers like yourself who have young children with different challenges. In your case, autism, ADHD, your daughter's bout with leukemia, and then you'd indicated that your youngest has had speech delays as well.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, what type of advice can you offer?
I would say just be open-minded. I think one of the common, I guess, issues that men face is we tend to try to fix things. We really want to fix it, but when you come to mental, I guess, or learning differences or mental disabilities, it's not really something you can fix, but you can try to accommodate as much as we can. So that is just kind of changing that mindset from being the man of my family. I need to fix everything, but instead of trying to be a fixer, sometimes you just need to be the person in the middle and try to provide the informations. And one more thing is really try to attend or find different support group that you can talk to other fathers. Like I really appreciate everything you do, David, with your organizations and the support that you're providing to other fathers that I believe your organization also provide like mentorship for a father that have more experience to the father that's new to having kids on with special needs. So finding those kind of resources and just be open-minded and talk to other fathers that have already been there and done that. I think that is going to be a huge help, because if you sometimes we don't realize, like with all the problem and the thing we face, we will get pushed to the corner and didn't realize there's a lot of other family already been through that similar situation that can really give us a different perspective on life.
Yeah, well, two good pieces of advice about not always being a fixer and trying to be accommodative, and then trying to align yourself with other people that have had more experience, right? So you're not trying to figure out everything on your own, right? It's just a matter of trying to use your time more efficiently, right? It just takes a lot more time to figure out things on your own than it would be to put yourself in a community of people that, like you said, have already been there and done that. So I'm sort of curious to know, why is it that you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
Yeah, because I'm really passionate in just sharing my experience, and hopefully I can help out another family like our own. And that go back to the mission for my own company. And I feel like it's also part of my calling to really help it out. And one more thing I forgot to mention is I actually didn't realize I also have ADHD myself until I was doing all the research for my son. It's like, I'm checking all the boxes myself. This is kind of weird. And then I was starting to thinking back through my childhood, and I kind of understand why I went through all the struggle I did as a kid in school. And that was always a part of me. I saw that just maybe I'm just not a good student. I'm not smart enough, but having the understanding of, I do have ADHD. That's just the way I am, really kind of helped me or give me a different perspective about myself. And that's something that I will actually maybe never realize if I didn't have my son.
Yeah, well, it's a very important enlightenment, right? And it's not going to change anything, right? But just having a broader awareness or understanding of your own circumstances,
Yeah.
I think not only informs you personally, but maybe it's something that you'll be able to relate to some of the challenges that Keanu is going through, right? Because you've already been there and done that yourself.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I would say, well, that's another interesting observation. I kind of was kind of seeing with the interaction with me and my son, because like you mentioned, a lot of things is similar between me and him, which tend to create more tension when two persons so much alike. So that's where that sometimes I struggle a little bit with my own parenting and my own interaction with my son, because I can see so much of myself in him that make me really frustrated. So that's something I'm still learning to how to cope with that, even to this day. I'm pretty sure that a lot of other fathers out there might resonate with that as well. So.
Oh yeah, well I think that you didn't use the word patience, but that's what comes to mind, is that you have to develop a certain level of patience, right? So, that's not something you're born with. I think that's something that we each need to work at. And it's not like you learn how to be patient and then you're always patient. It's just something that can be an ongoing process or challenge.
Yeah, one of the tools I have been using for a long time is really daily meditation. And I also do meditation with my kids too, each evening, just like 5 minutes. And because for a longer session, it's going to be harder for the kids. But for my own meditation, I would do like longer session if I just do it by myself. So, but that hasn't really helped me, especially with my ADHD and also with my son's situation. Just try to learn that practice is I think is critical, especially for people that sometimes have too many things on their mind. So,
yeah, well, it's good advice. Thank you for sharing. So, if somebody wants to learn more about LakiKid or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way to reach out to us is just they can visit our website at LakiKid.com. It's LAKIKID.com. Then you'll find all the resources that we have on our websites, and they can also find some of our products, and they can learn a little bit more about our companies and some of the resources that we provided. So.
Excellent. Well, we sure to include that in the show notes, so it'll make it as easy as possible for somebody to follow up with you. Jason, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Jason is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Jason, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children match up with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support other dads.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
To find out more about the Special Fathers Network, go to 21stcenturydads.org. This program was produced by me, Tom Couch. Thanks for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast.